Hey guys, and welcome to 86 M-Star. Mad Dog here.
M-Star here. Today I've got my 2017 Z900 that we showed you a video when we went and picked this up. It's a model year old, but it's brand new. And we've actually, both of us have had a chance to get out and put a couple miles on it. It's not broke in yet, so we haven't really got a rip on it yet, but today we're going to kind of do the first impressions for you and tell you what our overall feelings are just getting on it and giving it a ride.
Yeah, I think we should probably start off talking about all the normal stuff that you're first going to see when you get to the bike. So how it feels when you get on it, and you know what you're going to end up seeing in terms of like the gauge cluster in front of you, what sticks out. And that
yeah, let's just talk about the gauge cluster right off the bat. That's the most glaring thing on it. And I'm going to ding it on this a little bit. The heat thing, the heat temperature gauge for starters it's just a bar graph. You don't get an actual number. I'd much rather have an actual number so I can see what the temperature really was instead of that funky bar thing. And to complicate it even more, there's some kind of like economic mode button or light that comes on if you're doing a good job riding it in its RPMs. This little indicator comes on, and it comes on right next to the heat gauge, which is, it catches me off every time it pops on. I'm like, up, and then I have to look a second time. So not a fan of that at all. Yeah,
I think it might be exaggerated for us right now because it's a little cool outside. Like today we went for a ride, it's 58 degrees, maybe at best. And so what happens is you get stopped and then that gauge just climbs. I mean, it climbs kind of out of control. And then you get rolling and it just dumps back down. So it hasn't been easy to get a feel for what's normal and what's okay for it to be.
Yeah, that's part of it too. It's also a reverse LED, so the screen's actually black with white letters instead of white with black letters, which I would prefer it the other way. I think I'll get used to it, and it's probably okay. In most lighting situations, it's not been a huge problem, but I would have preferred it to be the other direction. The other part of that gauge cluster that I really didn't like was the tack. It's a sweeping digital notches, I guess you'd say, which is fine to read and get a good grasp on, but once it gets up to where it really wants you to start shifting, I don't know, I haven't actually looked to see where it is, 5-6 grand, whatever it is, it'll start blinking at you to let you know you're supposed to be shifting, which is kind of annoying if I don't want to be shifting yet. So don't scream at me and tell me to shift the bike. I'll shift it when I'm ready.
Yeah, I feel the same way about a lot of things though. They like early shift lights.
Yes, they do. But the fact that that's so glaring, because the whole dash is flashing at you basically because of the way those tack bars are. That's the dominant feature on that with the speedometer in the middle. But those are really overwhelming, I would say. Again, maybe one of those things that I'll get used to. Like I said, it is the gauge cluster. It's the thing that you're going to see the most when you're riding the bike. So I'm going to ding it pretty hard on that.
Yep. Yeah, and it's important to have everything you need. And it does give you 2 separate trip meters.
Yes.
It gives you an active fuel mileage per gallon and an average fuel mileage per gallon. So those are pretty nice.
And it also gives you the range, which is, I don't know how useful that is, but it's there. And in addition, it also gives you a bar graph for your fuel, which I find the bar graph for the fuel is fine. I don't have a problem with the bar graph for fuel. I'm used to seeing that. Moving on, I guess we have to kind of qualify this just because of what we ride and what's in our standard rotation. I think that it would be fair to qualify this in the same category or compare it up against your 636 or a 600 class Super Sport. Now it is 900 plus cc's, which I know a lot of people, as soon as they hear that 900 number or that liter bike number, they're going to want to know why I didn't compare to like Cappy's RR or something like that. And I think the reason why is, you know, for me, it's price point. It's closer to a 600 Super Sport in both price and horsepower rating. I would say that that's a more fair comparison. And that's where the comparisons are going to kind of start and stop, I guess. Trying to compare it up against a cutting edge Super Sport is probably not super fair, but that's what we got to work with. That's what our experience is. So that's why this conversation is going to kind of go the way it goes.
Yep. First thing that I noticed when I hopped on the bike and actually started rolling it was how upright seated you are. It's kind of hard to tell just looking at it because it looks so mean and looks so forward, I mean racy, which is something that is really cool, something that the manufacturers have been doing recently that you didn't used to get out of your standard bikes. But ergonomically way more comfortable than my 636. I mean, you're in a really good position. It feels like you're kind of sitting back and just cruising right along.
Yep, I would agree with 100% of that. It's going to be much more comfortable for me to ride distance on than it would be on a super sport bike. It's just that simple. The seating position, the seat's relatively comfortable. The handlebars are really wide. They feel really wide to me. Now, again, we're comparing it up against the 636. And also, you know, last year I spent a lot of time on both a 250 Ninja and a 300 Honda. So those are both quite a bit narrower. So that's going to take some getting used to, but I really like it. With the wide bars, it feels like you can really just throw it in. And I think it helps the bike hide some of the weight that it's got over a 600. I feel like it hides its weight really well. And that's not to say that it's a super fat bike by any means.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't call it heavy at all. Hopping on it, I mean, it feels plenty light when you're throwing it into the corner. I mean, whatever they did to make this thing turn, they did it right. I mean, it turns in probably better than the Ninja 250, probably better than the 300.
Absolutely.
It wants to go.
And I think part of that's going to go to the fact that both of those other two bikes that we just mentioned are both entry-level bikes, and the suspension and brakes on this are so much better than that 250, 300 quarter-liter bike class. I would say that the suspension and the brakes are really close to on par with the 600 Super Sport. I think ride quality-wise, for what you're actually going to notice. Now, taking it to a track and doing a track day, your experience may vary a little bit on that. But you have some adjustability, and for the street, it really does feel like a Super Sport bike to me, albeit maybe just a little bit stiff.
Well, stiffness-wise, I feel like, say, you know, comparing directly, as I hop off my 636 and onto this, like, the feedback into my hands, and I think that's probably due to the seating position, is so much less.
Absolutely.
I mean, it makes it feel like a softer ride, but I mean, it doesn't, like, you know, do anything weird in the corners. I mean, it is locked in. You get on the throttle, the bike doesn't adjust the suspension. Like, even one of the things I noticed on my 250, I mean, it's got cheap suspension, of course. You roll on midway through the corner and you feel the suspension make an adjustment to your throttle change, and on this, I mean, it stays locked in.
Yeah, and I think it does give you plenty of feedback for sure, even with the upright seating position on the handlebars. I never feel like I'm out of touch with what the front wheel's doing at all. I feel like it's definitely giving me the feedback that I need.
Tires wise, it came with a set of Dunlop Sports Max, which is not a tire that I've done any research on, because it's not like a track day tire, or it's not the one everyone's talking about, but so far I thought they felt great.
We've had a lot of cool days. We're just getting into the riding season. I don't know if they're going to be soft enough to really suit me, but only time will tell. And warmer roads, really, testing wise, we've not really been able to test them, but yeah, they feel fine. They definitely feel better than the tires that come on most of the entry-level bikes. They didn't give you the budget tires on this. They feel reasonable for what you give.
Power-wise, it's got such a different feel than all of those lower capacity engines.
Oh, sure. And then I think this is where we really have to really limit it to either the 636 or I mean, we throw the double R into that, but having this inline 4 is just such a smoother power transfer than the single that the 300 came with, or the parallel twin that the Ninja came with. You know, the inline 4 is definitely a much smoother engine, and this one, for some reason, it really stands out. Even if I come back to back off the 636, and that's not to say that that's not a smooth engine, but maybe it's the fact that you're a little more isolated. They isolated the engine a little more, or the milder cam that they put in this. I don't know what it is, but that motor really, it's cliche, it really does feel electric. And with that power band being so flat all the way across, you get the torque from from way down low to all the way up to as high as I've ran it. And again, we've not revved it, you know, revved it to the moon yet, but the power torque curve feels flat. I mean, it just feels like you can't get stuck in the wrong gear coming off the corner. I never feel like, oh, I should have been one lower. It'll pull from anywhere.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, a lot of what worries me about the bigger capacity on really any bike is the zero throttle to that 1 to 5% throttle. You're in the corner, you're on zero as you're starting to dive in, and then you want to start feeding it back in, and you know that even just a little bit of unexpected chop, you know, as it comes on, can really feel sketchy. I mean, and that's a problem on smaller capacity bikes too, but the bigger, obviously, it's bigger, and whatever they did with the fueling on this bike, I feel like it's just perfect. You can really just ease right into it. It doesn't feel like it wants to hop or, you know, jump out right as I get on the throttle, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of that's just in the mapping, and they've made it very user friendly. I think that was the goal here, where you're not trying to make a track day sharp tool. It's probably a lot easier to make it user friendly. I think the emphasis, you can tell the difference between this and a modern sport bike for sure.
Noise going down the road is something interesting, and the pipe actually looks pretty cool. It's reasonable size compared to a lot of the bigger capacity modern stuff, but it's actually got a chamber under here too. That's something that they've been doing on only certain bikes, but it definitely looks better than the giant can on the side there.
Yeah, and that's something, I guess we'll kind of start to talk about mods a little bit here on what I plan on doing with the bike. And the pipe is one of the things that's going to stay. I'm not going to swap a pipe out on this bike. Part of that is the U-clears. So we've all been running U-clears in our helmets for comms. And I notice with all of us, when we get together with a big group and everybody has pipes, you get a lot of feedback through it, and it makes the U-clear more annoying than useful. Since my wife and I, she's also got the new 300 Ninja, and we're not going to put a pipe on it either. So at least when Mickey and I are riding together, at least we won't get the feedback. Now when I'm with the rest of the guys that are all running aftermarket pipes, I guess I'll still have to deal with that. But at least I won't be part of the problem. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So we'll be leaving the stock can on there, and then that'll also save me from running the risk of having to do some mapping changes, or you know, it just not needed. The bike doesn't feel like it needs it, and it's got a good tone to it. Like you said, it's got a good tone going down the road. There's a really interesting intake howl that it has when you get up to speed that I really like. And if you put a pipe on this, I'm afraid you definitely mask that. Yeah,
I would say, like, standing on the side of the road, being next to the bike, and you get on it a little bit, it doesn't like scream and scare you like, you know, a bike with a pipe does. But when you're on the bike and you give it some throttle, that intake howl, it's just a little different than what I'm used to hearing, because it sounds big, it sounds mean, it sounds like it comes from the front of your bike, and it, you know, just kind of adds to the experience of pulling out of a corner and getting all that torque.
So moving on to other mods, I did a windscreen change out, and it didn't come with a fly screen at all. It had a little plastic cover that basically came to the top of the gauge cluster that did nothing. So I added this little fly screen to it. I don't know how much that's really going to help out overall. It's got to help some, but I went ahead and I'll take what I can get for wind protection. That's one area where when you're on a naked bike, you just have to deal with the wind in your face all day, which if you're riding around town or out doing quick perimeter runs, not a big deal. But you get on a trip, a couple, 200-300 miles down the road, I think any little bit of wind that you can get off of you is definitely going to be appreciated. The only other mod that I can think of right off the bat that I'm going to do is we will be doing a fender eliminator kit, just like we did on the 300, and light swap. I have bought the light for it already, and I bought a bracket for the tail light, or for the license plate, and it isn't going to look the way I wanted it. It's not going to work the way I wanted it to, so I went ahead and ordered a different one, and I'll get you guys a video eventually of those mods being done, or at least done so that you can see them. So yeah, I'm going to kind of wrap this video up now. I will say this, that overall at 300 miles, I'm happy so far. I'd say that I don't have any buyer's remorse whatsoever. I think that I'm going to be really happy with this in the long run. Of course, I do still have some, you guys know I have an affinity for smaller bikes, and there's still some of those in our stable for me to get a ride. So, you know, there's nothing like flicking around a little bike, and I know this kind of goes against pretty much everything that I've been about the last few years. But I think I'm gonna have a good time riding the bigger bike, and I'll keep you guys updated and let you know how this ends up working out for me.
Well, thanks a bunch for coming along today, guys. Listening to some of these first impressions here on the Kawasaki Z900. I hope this gave you guys a good place to start. It's kind of a newer build of a bike, so there's not as much information out there about it, and we wanted to kind of get some of this out to you. And we'll certainly bring you a follow-up once you've got some extra miles on it and see how it's working out in the long term.
Appreciate you guys coming along. Let me talk about this bike. Make sure you come back in the near future. We're going to be doing some more adventure stuff, and I'll have a little better feel for what the bike is. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys next week. Okay guys, summer's here, and every time I take my helmet off or put it on, all this is in the way. So in the vein of Groundhog Day, I'm officially calling it riding season. And this is why you always hire a professional.